Well, hello, Chatham-Kent. I hope everyone's doing well at this beautiful lunch hour on February the 9th. My name is Philip Mock, and I'm the project coordinator for the Chatham-Kent Prosperity Roundtable. We are a local initiative here in Chatham-Kent looking to tackle poverty differently. Today, we're going to be talking about a conversation that has been growing in our community for some time. Chatham-Kent, like many communities across Canada, are facing an affordable housing crisis. We have all been experiencing the increases in rental prices over the past 2 years, and frankly, there's no end in sight. With this increase in prices comes a new issue in the affordable housing crisis, namely that housing is viewed as an investment opportunity rather than a person's home. Vacancy rates in Chatham-Kent are at a 20-year low at 1.2%. As vacancy rates go down, the incentive to end tenancies and increase rent goes up. You might have heard of Renovictions before. It's a term that describes the eviction of tenants to allow landlords to renovate a rental unit. And this is legal under the Residential Tenancies Act. However, these types of evictions are increasingly being used to evict tenants in low-priced rental units to make way for higher-paying tenants. And that's where the problem is starting. That is, there are legal ways to end a tenancy, and then there are legal ways to end it. And that is why we're here today, to help you understand your rights. The Residential Tenancies Act sets the rules and regulations for landlords and tenants in the province. This act is intended to ensure that both landlords and tenants are protected. Where there is disagreement, that's where the Landlord and Tenant Board will step in to address the disagreement in accordance with the act. Unfortunately, not everyone knows what their rights and responsibilities are, and that's something we're working on. Today, we welcome back Jeff Wilkins, housing paralegal with the Chatham-Kent Legal Clinic. We'll be going over some examples of situations that he and the legal clinic have recently experienced, including a new trend called cash for keys. He will explain the differences between an N11 and an N13 notice. And in closing, he's going to share a few tips that might help. For example, if someone asks you to sign something quickly, as in sign it right now, don't. We're hopeful at the very least you come away from today's conversation knowing that you have rights under the Residential Tenancies Act, and whenever in doubt, know that the Chatham-Kent Legal Clinic and Employment and Social Services are here to help. Jeff, welcome.
Thank you, Phil. Hi, everybody. Like Phil had mentioned, my name's Jeff Wilkins, and I work for the Chatham-Kent Legal Clinic. We are open right now, but we're working remotely, so please give our office a call if you run into any situations that you need help with. The number is 519-351-6771. Now, Phil was just mentioning what he had called renovictions. That's a term that's been used for a few years now, originating out of Toronto when this was a really big problem in Toronto. What that term is used for is that a landlord will come to a tenant and say that they have to do renovations, so you need to move out of the unit. That's not necessarily true. If a landlord is doing renovations to your unit, they should be serving you what they call an N13 notice. Now, these notices look pretty scary. They say the word evicted on it. They say that we would like you to move out by this day, but these are not eviction notices. With the N13, it gives protection to the tenant where the tenant wouldn't normally have protection. If the landlord does not do the renovations and let you move back in, you have remedies that you can go after the landlord. The N13 should be used because it gives compensation to the tenant, either a month or 3 months, depending what kind of a unit you're in. And the tenant also has right to first refusal at the same rental rate. Most landlords don't bother telling tenants this, and the tenant thinks that they will have to pay more. That is not the case. So they have to give you compensation. The tenant has the right to first refusal, and the landlord also has to show all of the permits that they obtained at the hearing. If none of these 3 tests are met, the application should fail. Now, you have to ask yourself, if the landlord isn't using the proper procedure, why not? There is a process to do this, and there is a proper way to do it. You have to ask yourself, how will this affect my family, and is this legitimate? What most landlords will try to do is they will try to have you sign what they call an N11. Again, this looks like an eviction notice, but an N11 is a lot different than an N13. The N13 gives you the right to first refusal with the same amount of rent. An N11 cancels your tenancy. So they don't even have to have a hearing for this. The board sees that the tenant and the landlord have both signed ending the tenancy, and they just give an eviction order. What does an N11 do compared to an N13 in the landlord's situation? Well, it relieves the landlord of all the legal responsibilities they normally would have with an N13. They can re-rent the unit for any amount of money they want, and we've seen rents almost triple in some cases. The landlord can also negotiate a shorter length of time for you to leave. Normally it would be 120 days, but with an N11, it's 60 days. Well, that's what most of them are anyway. There's no hearing to prove the landlord's case. You're just evicted. You have, in essence, agreed to end your tenancy. What I'm seeing a lot of landlords doing also is having a contract written up where the tenant will end their tenancy. This has other clauses in it, like non-disclosure clause for amount of money that they would be giving the tenant. When you run into these situations with contracts, like Phil had said, nothing needs to be signed at all. Nothing needs to be signed on the same day. So please, if somebody's pushing you to try to get you to sign something, tell them no. I'd like to get some legal advice, and give the clinic a call. Nothing needs to be signed the same day. What we're also seeing is cash for keys, as Phil has mentioned. This is legal. What would normally happen is a landlord will come to the tenant and say, I need you to move out. I'm willing to give you X number of dollars to move out. You're allowed to take that offer if you'd like to, but the problem is they normally don't offer enough money for you to move out. A few $1,000s may sound great at the time, but just remember that place that you're leaving that you're paying $700 to $1,000 for, you won't be able to find another place for that amount of money. So you really have to think, especially right now, about accepting a cash for keys deal. I would suggest nobody do that if they can, because right now there's no inventory out in the market, and it will be very, very difficult for anybody to find any housing. Is there any questions that we wanted to talk about, Phil? That's kind of what I had on the N13 and N11, unless you'd like me to reiterate some of the facts of those.
Sure. I mean, I was actually, as I mentioned prior to this Facebook Live, I was saying that I had not necessarily heard of an N13 or N11 before. So this is brand new information, maybe for a lot of our viewers. So I just wanted to reiterate, if you could, if I got this straight, the N13 is the landlord asking you to evict so they can renovate the unit, but you have a right to refuse to evict, and if you refuse to evict, they cannot increase your rent. Is that I got that properly?
Sorry, maybe I wasn't clear enough on that. You have a right to first refusal. So as soon as the renovations are done, they have to let you back into the unit for the same amount of money. Most landlords will not tell a tenant that. A lot of landlords will actually say after the renovations, you have to pay X number of dollars more. That's not the case. And that's why a lot of landlords are trying to get around the N13, because an N11 will end the tenancy and they can do what they want. It's trying to dodge the proper way of doing renovations, and it's happening all over the province.
Okay, so N13 is, you need to evict for a period of time because I'm going to renovate, but you have the right as the tenant to come back into the newly renovated rental unit at the same price you're paying before the renovation.
Exactly.
And then with an N11, it is an agreement between the tenant and the landlord to just end the tenancy. No ifs, ands, or buts. That's just the end of tenancy.
That's just to end the tenancy, and they're very difficult to get turned around because the board will look at it as an agreement. So there won't even be a hearing. The first the tenant will find out about it was when the eviction notice shows up in their mailbox.
And I think what you said very clearly at the end of your opening was, you get an N13 or an N11 or even just a contract asking you to be signed immediately. We got to get this done. The advice is, please don't sign right away. Maybe take a copy and call the Chatham-Kent Legal Clinic for advice.
Definitely. Please do not sign anything, because like I said, nothing has to be signed ASAP. If they're pressuring you to sign something, that should be a flag right there saying, I need to get some legal advice on this. And we will definitely help you out if you call us. A lot of times what I'm seeing also is they're having tenants sign these contracts and not giving them a copy of it. Kind of makes you wonder why they're not giving a copy to the tenant so that they can get it checked out. But definitely, if this session could be renamed, it should be renamed, don't sign anything right away. Get some legal advice first. It's a lot easier to sort things out if there's an assigned contract or assigned N11.
Gotcha. Okay. We actually have some questions coming in from viewers, and I think this goes right back to the point you're making between the N13 and N11s. The question is, my landlord wants me to use another unit that they have already renovated, but they're asking me to pay a higher price for that unit while my current unit is being renovated. Should I move? Should I take that offer?
Well, that's totally up to you. You can take it if you like the newer unit and you can afford to pay the extra money, but you don't have to. The landlord has two options with the N13. He can either give you the compensation or try to move you to another unit. A lot of times when the N13 is given, and it could be 3-4 months before the repairs are done, the tenant's going to have to find a place to go to. So that may be a situation where you say, you know what, it's brand new, everything in the unit, I can afford it. Sure, why not? Very seldom, I think, will a landlord renovate a unit and try to transfer a tenant that he's already got in there into that unit for a few $100s, because he's already done the renovations and he can probably double the amount of money if the tenant was gone already. So, yeah.
Okay. Good to know. Now, we talked about cash for keys and this concept that landlords will say, hey, here's a couple $1,000. You agree to evict. and we part ways and you take your money and you find rent, or you find an apartment somewhere else, a rental unit somewhere else. Some viewer questions coming in. The first one being, if someone signed a cash for keys offer, can they get out of that with some legal assistance? Is there a way to sort of break that offer if they do sign something for a cash for keys?
It will be difficult, but it all depends on how the offer was signed. If you had signed it under duress, if you were told you need to sign this right away, and you just signed it because you felt like you were bullied into it, or you had no other way of doing it. You can get out from under them sometimes, but it's pretty difficult, and you have to prove that you signed this under duress, and this is something you would not have signed if you didn't think that you had any other choice. But that's the way the landlord's starting to sell these now. Some landlords are starting to sell it this way, as you don't have a choice. Either you sign this and I'll give you some money, or you'll be out in 60 days. And quite truthfully, with the N13 notice, there has to be a hearing for that. There is not, even though there is a termination date on the notice, you do not have to move out by that termination date. And if you want a hearing, you can go to a hearing, and the landlord has to prove his case that he has met all of the tests for the N13. So that's why I keep pushing people. If the landlord wants you to move out for renovations, make sure you get the N13, because you've got a lot of backing with that, and you have some protection. Right now, a lot of landlords are trying whatever they can, because the market is so great, just to get tenants out of there. And in some instances, I can't blame them. When the market goes up this big, sure, they have a right to make money, but still, we have people that are homeless, and that's getting worse and worse. And it's almost like that part of the discussion isn't out there. Yeah, unfortunately.
You make a very fair point. I think that's where that piece about our vacancy rates are at 1.2%. And frankly, for if just to maybe put that in some numbers, sometimes there's only like 10 to 20 units for rent in all of Chatham-Kent sometimes on a given month. I mean, 10 to 20 units for our population and for people in this community who need rental units or to rent, that is significantly lower than other communities that might have hundreds and hundreds of units on the market, depending on a larger city. So when you have people who are receiving an N11 or are receiving cash for keys offers or signing contracts, and those landlords are jumping the price right up to 1,1700 for a one bedroom, that is removing those truly affordable units from the market, which makes it even harder for people to stay housed.
When I had first come to Chatham about 4 years ago, you could get a one bedroom for around $750. That has almost doubled now. And like you said, there's no inventory out there. The scary part of this is Chatham is now a target. All around Chatham, there is hardly any houses for sale. And if they are for sale, they're pretty high priced. Chatham's real estate has gone up too. But it's kind of a sweet spot now, and you're seeing a lot of people from out of town buying up properties, and some real estate agents, unfortunately, are telling the tenants they have to leave and getting them to sign contracts that they will leave. So please, if I can say anything, you're going to hear this over and over again, please don't sign anything without talking to somebody. That's what we're there for, and we will get back to you very quickly.
Perfect. And as you can see on our Facebook Live, the Chatham-Kent Legal Clinic's phone number is right there. Please do not hesitate to call. Going back to our viewer questions here, Jeff, I have one that came in again on the cash for keys concept. Is there a form like the N11 or N13 that's associated with cash for keys? Like, is there another formalized form, I guess, that you would have to sign for a cash for keys offer?
No, normally what it is, it's a contract, and with the contract, they will stipulate how much it's for, and the landlord will have the tenant sign an N11. So they've got a contract laying everything out, plus they also have the N11 terminating the tenancy. And normally, because both parties are in agreement with that, that just goes away. Both parties go on their own, and everybody's happy, hopefully.
Following on that same kind of concept, another viewer question we had was, if the landlord sells the home or the apartment building, Do you have to leave if the new owner wants to move in or renovate your unit?
No, if the new owner wanted to renovate the unit, they would again have to give you an N13 and would have to meet all of those tests again. If the new owner wants to move in, they can evict you. These are called no fault evictions, and they're one of the worst evictions out there because, quite truthfully, the tenant's done nothing. They probably lived there for a long time, and now the new owner is coming in and saying that they want to move in. That's called an N12. And with these N12s, there's also rules for that. And actually pretty strong rules now since COVID has hit and the market has gone so squirrely. What they've done is with the N12s, they've said, okay, you have to move in for at least 1 year. And if you don't move in for 1 year, the tenant can come back after the landlord and they can get the difference in their rent from the new place to the old place. They can collect general damages. And I've heard as much as 1 full year's worth of rent at the new rate. You might even be able to be moved back into the unit if nobody's moved in. And the landlord could get up to a $250,000 fine if they're a corporation doing this. So there's a lot of pushback from the landlord and tenant board with these no fault evictions. I used to see a lot of N12s for the landlord's own use. Now it's a lot of N12s and N13s for renovations. So we kind of see where things are going right now, unfortunately.
So that just to kind of clarify, that N12 is specifically if the landlord or a direct family member of the landlord wants to move into that rental unit and is asking the current tenant to evict so they or a direct family member can move in. But there's a lot of protections and they have to really prove their case that this is what's actually going to be happening.
Yeah, and you want them to do the proper forms because like with the N12, there's also compensation that's given to the tenant. And if you don't have an N11, an N13 or an N12, you don't have that protection if the landlord is doing these notices in what they call bad faith. So definitely, please get the proper notices. And if you have any questions and they want you to sign anything, again, please don't sign anything and please get a hold of the legal clinic.
And building off that question, another viewer was asking, so if my landlord sells the building that I'm renting, the building that I'm renting an apartment in or the home I'm renting, can the new owner just kick me out and raise the price to whatever they want?
No, again, that would be a bad faith application where they have not moved out. And they're very easy to fight. Believe it or not, some landlords have gone to the point where they say, yes, I'm moving in. The tenant moves out and then 2 weeks later, the unit's on Kijiji for rent again. If this does happen, please get a hold of us because I'll gladly do a bad faith application because these are the type of landlords that are taking advantage of the system. And right now we can't have that. We need landlords out there and we need good landlords out there. And there are tons of good landlords, but there are the select few that will try to go around the system. That's what we're here for. We're here to try to help you out and let you know your legal rights. Sometimes there's nothing we can do, but a lot of the times there is something we can do. Either we can find out if it's legitimate or not, or give you the tools to find that out yourself, or even negotiate a longer termination date or something. Everything's on the table at that point because the person, if they're legit, they really do want to move into the place. So please give us a call. We can help you with that.
Now I'm going to take this question on a different spin. So we just talked about it in terms of an N12 if the landlord wants to move in. But what happens if, say, and this has happened, we've heard of this happening many times, a landlord will come in and just want to kick out the current tenant because they're paying a low rent and they want to just get a new tenant who's willing to pay double the amount. Mm-hmm. Can the new landlord do that?
No, say no, thank you. I'm not moving out. Be that blunt about it. There are specific ways that you have to evict a tenant. And if a landlord isn't using those specific ways, it's for one of two reasons. They either don't know or they don't care. And like I said, there's a lot of good landlords out there that want to do the right thing. They just don't know what the rules are. So sometimes if a tenant will come to us, I don't mind contacting the landlord and saying, hey, you need to do it this way. I'm not sure if you knew that. And a lot of times they're very apologetic. Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do that. Because there are people that legitimately have bought their houses and want to move in. The landlords feel bad about that, to tell the truth. Some landlords I've talked to are just, because they bought the house not meeting the tenant, and then all of a sudden they met this person and realized that this person's going to be evicted. So I've had some landlords that were upset that they had to do it. But that being said, it is legal if they want to move in there, that they can do that. But get a hold of us so that you know exactly what your rights are.
Now, kind of carrying on this N12 conversation, if the landlord wants to come in and live with your family in the rental unit or in the place that you're renting, a viewer asked a question. If you gave, so let's say, for example, I'm an owner of a building or a home that I'm renting out, and I sell it to someone because they want to move in with their family.
Sure.
But then once that new owner has purchased the property, they actually they went through the N12, the tenant left, but then they put the rental unit up on Kijiji. Is the old owner that sold it in the first place, are they liable at all for anything, or is this only on the new owner of the property who's kind of screwing over the tenant?
This is all on the new owner. When a landlord sells to another landlord, they inherit everything to do with that tenancy, the lease, the current rent, the last month's rent, everything. So that would be on the person who just bought it. It would be the new landlord. I have seen old landlords give N12 saying that the buyer is going to move in. Those are also a little sketchy, because with the N12s, you're not supposed to serve these unless you've got an offer on the table that you can show. So again, I hate to keep harping on this, but any of these notices, because some of them are so complex with a lot of moving parts, get a hold of us. This is all I do, and I'd be more than happy to help you out with these. A lot of N12 questions.
And you make a great point. I mean, when you look at these N11s or N13s and 12, all the different types of notices you might get, they look scary. They have this big, huge black bar that says potential end of tenancy, and everyone starts thinking that they've now been fully evicted and they're starting to look for other places. So I think to mimic what you've been saying so far, Jeff, is these are notices. Please contact the legal clinic for further advice on these notices.
I'm absolutely amazed at how many people I talk to that have gotten a notice for not just an N12 or an N13, but an N4 for rent arrears. Again, these all look scary. And of course, if you're in some kind of panic because you're behind on rent, or you've heard that your landlord's selling, and you get this notice, the first thing your eye trains on is eviction and termination date. And I'd say at least 3/4 of the people that get these notices move out because they think they have to. And the timelines to move out, especially for rent arrears, the termination date is 14 days after that. So I've seen people just pack up and leave without getting advice. And if they would have gotten advice on that, they would have known that there's a hearing that has to come up. And if it is for rent arrears, the landlord tenant board will force the landlord into a repayment plan. I've seen 36-month repayment plans before. So with any notice, that's not the end all to be all. It's not an eviction notice. Try to just take a deep breath and give the clinic a call, because we can walk you through what your rights are and really how long you have before you do have to move, if you do even have to move.
Now, the viewer question we were just kind of talking about, there was just a piece of clarification. And so I just want to make sure I understand this as well. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to read the question verbatim just to make sure that I've asked it properly and you're able to answer it to the best of your ability. If you gave your tenants an N12 in good faith because the new tenants said they were going to move in with their family, and then they turn around and put it on the market for rent with a higher rent rate, is the old owner responsible for anything? And a point of clarification, there's no current lease, But the new buyers, I should say, instead of the new tenants, the new buyers have already posted online before getting possession of this.
Yeah, you'd be going after the new owners. Even it's the person that's put their name on this notice that would be in bad faith. So if the old landlord did that, you could go after the old landlord, but really, it should be the new landlord. That's why some of these are very intricate, and you need to know all of the facts on them. These are two of the toughest notices to wrap your head around because you didn't see them a whole lot before, but now that's all you're seeing. And every situation is different. In that situation there, again, it's who signed the notice, but if you've moved out because the new landlord says they're moving in and they don't move in, that's bad faith on the new landlord. And these bad faith applications are very easy to do. Very, very easy to do. All you need is proof that they're trying to rent it out. And like I said, some landlords are so, I've seen them on Kijiji before. We've actually brought the Kijiji ads to the hearing and said, look, they're trying to rent it out. Okay, yeah.
Now, and maybe this is beneficial to the individual viewer who posted this question, and just for anyone else who's watching. For the Chatham-Kent Legal Clinic, of course, if you're a tenant, call access that advice. I'm wondering, do you also, like, if this individual wanted to contact you for further guidance, could this potential landlord or any landlord reach out to Legal Clinic as well, or do you only work with tenants?
I will only give tenants advice, but I will work with any landlord that wants to try to work the problem out. Like I said, we need landlords. And some landlords just want to do things the proper way. I can't give them advice, but I can steer them to where to get the information or what their legal liabilities may be if they continue down the path they're choosing. But if a landlord were to phone me, I can't give him advice. I can't tell him what to do, but I can steer him in the right direction. And I'm more than happy to, because we want the landlords to be as educated as the tenants so that everybody knows exactly what they need to do. It'd be great if my phone didn't ring. That'd be, my job's done. The phone's not ringing anymore. Everybody's educated, but unfortunately it's going the other way. We're becoming busier, and I think that's because some landlords are not following the process properly.
Okay. Well, thanks. I'm just wanted to clarify that piece because I know that the Legal Clinic has some specific parameters to how you are working as a community agency, but I just wanted to see if that was the case. Just a reminder, we're talking with Jeff Wilkins from the Chatham-Kent Legal Clinic. The phone number is going to be posted right back in a second here on the Facebook Live, or you can just Google Chatham-Kent Legal Clinic. They've just redone their website. It has a ton of information on it, as well as helps you get in contact with them online or through your phone number, which is here, as well as their website.
Thanks for mentioning that, Phil. We actually starting to get quite a bit of contact through our website. I'm getting a lot of emails from people. Normally, I like giving advice over the phone because as soon as you write something down, somebody might take that advice and try to put it in a different scenario, and that rarely works. But yeah, if they want to email us or phone us, we'll get back to them for sure.
Fantastic. Going back to some of the viewer questions coming in, there's one that just came in that says, is there a cooling off period in Ontario for any cash for keys or other contracts, or for the N11 or N13?
For landlord and tenant board law, no. That's why I'm very adamant about not signing anything. There's no cooling off period, and if nothing needs to be signed right away. And if you think something's too good to be true, it probably is. So just take a step back. If this person does want to deal with you legitimately, they'll give you time to think this over. Let me sleep on it is the perfect way to say something that won't be adversarial to them. Just let me sleep on it. You don't have to tell them you're getting a hold of the legal clinic if you don't want to. A lot of times, though, if you do tell them, I'd like to phone the legal clinic on this, that sometimes will make things a lot clearer in both parties' minds that this is what we need to do to solve this problem. So you can drop our name if you like, but yeah, normally with, yeah, you can drop our name if you like, but just tell them that you need a night to think about it. That's all you really need to do. If they want you to sign that quickly, there's something weird going on.
I'm not too sure if we've lost Jeff here for a second. Jeff, you're back. Okay, fantastic.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I was looking at you kind of not seeing anything, and I thought, oh, frozen.
You know what? It's the world of Facebook Live and Zoom nowadays, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I guess a question that many might be thinking is, okay, you know what? Why even bother going to landlord and tenant board if I'm just going to be evicted anyway? You know, why even bother going through that whole process? It's online now. I mean, it's a whole rigmarole, but why even bother in the first place?
Well, you can look at it that way and just throw your hands up and say, okay, he wants me out. He's eventually going to get me out, so I'm just going to leave. And a lot of people do that. They're not up for the fight. But the landlord tenant board is not like a criminal court. It's not as rigid as those courts. And they understand this. They do understand what the tenants are going through. And they hear stories from landlords every day, 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. I'll tell you this way, with N12s, they had an N12 block for landlord's own use about 3 weeks ago. Half of them were thrown out because they were not legitimate. So there's a lot of those being thrown out. You can't just say it's not worth the fight. But if you are willing to put up the fight, we are also tenant duty counsel at these hearings. So if you let us know when the hearing is, we can show up for that hearing and go into mediation with you and try to mediate some kind of an agreement, or at least give you the ups and downs on the procedure or what to look at. And you can phone us before the hearing and we can tell you our thoughts on what this application is about and if it is legitimate or not. I get it that people will look and think, oh, this is a huge process, but they've actually made it a little easier now on some tenants where tenants can just phone in now. I'd still like to see it go back to in-person hearings because I see a lot of tenants don't show up now because they don't want to try to navigate the Zoom system. But if you're willing to do it, all it takes is a phone call and we'll walk you through the whole process from beginning to end. And a lot of times we end up getting a very favorable outcome for the tenant. Yeah, I get it though. I get why some tenants would not want to go through the process, but please do. We're here to help you.
It is it's a large process sometimes. There's a lot of paperwork, there's things to be signed. So I think it's important to remember that it is a process and the legal clinic is here to help you walk through every step of that process. It can be overwhelming at times, but that's why they're there, to help you through that process.
And one thing I wanted to point out too is a lot of landlords will have contracts or say that you need to be out by this date, and the tenant thinks they need to be out. One thing most tenants don't realize is the only person that can evict you in Ontario is the sheriff. And the only way a sheriff is going to evict you is if there's a court order from the board saying that they've ordered an eviction. And the only way to get that court order in most cases is to have the hearing. So the hearing's going to happen one way or another. If they're going to do it legitimately, they can try to come in and change the locks, but that's not legal. And if you were to phone the police and say, hey, my landlord just changed my locks without a hearing, chances are you're going to get back into your unit pretty quickly. If that were to ever happen and a landlord or property manager just locked you out, again, get a hold of the clinic. It takes one phone call sometimes to let them know what the tenant's rights are, and then you could be back in pretty quickly. So I know I keep saying this, but please get a hold of us. Even though we're busy, we like to be busy because that means we're saving tenancies. So please get a hold of us.
Fantastic. Another question that's come in is if, let's say, for example, I've texted my landlord or sent a letter to my landlord agreeing or telling them that I want to move out or I will move out because they've asked me to. Mm-hmm. But now that I've heard all this information, I want to change my mind. Is my text or my letter valid notice, and would I still have to move out?
The landlord may try to argue that that is valid notice, but the argument I would make would be, well, I did do that, and then I got some legal advice. And I probably should have got some legal advice before I decided. But with that legal advice, I decided that, no, I don't want to leave now. Because the landlord, if he does want to evict you, will still have to go through the same process, serve you some kind of notice. There'll be a hearing that the tenant will be invited to. And then he'll have to convince the board that during a pandemic, when there's a housing crisis, that we should evict this tenant. So you can probably get out of it. But then again, there could be a little arguing from the landlord, and you've already kind of soured this relationship. But get a hold of us. Sometimes just to talk with the landlord will solve that problem. Most landlords are understanding. And if you did change your mind and gave them a legitimate reason, look, I can't afford it, a lot of them are understanding. They see what's happening in the market. So some of them will say, you know what, Jeff, that's fine. We'll just forget all about this. But normally they should do it with the proper notices.
And you know what, talking about good landlords, I think it's important to answer some questions from viewers who might be experienced or new landlords in general with this as well. We have a question from I assume it's a landlord here in town, and they were asking, there are some good landlords that are left here in the community, but sometimes after they've rented and the person's either been evicted or decide to leave on their own, they're left with a trashed house, water bills, and thousands of dollars in rent that's owing. There's really no help for them. As a landlord, there's no way to get that money back. Even though they're trying to provide affordable housing as best as possible with the market, they are sitting with a house that's completely ruined, and they have to invest a ton of money to get it back in shape to maintain the rental unit. So I wonder if you could speak a little bit to sort of landlords' rights as well as a little bit about this person's experience and if there are any opportunities for them to recoup some of that cost.
Yeah, that's a sad story because I see it quite often, and quite truthfully, I've had some very good landlords just leave the business because they were fed up. And like I said, we need good landlords to be out there. One thing I might mention is the Landlord Self-Help Center. They're there to give landlords free legal advice. Their number is 1-800-730-3218. And before I worked for the legal clinic, I used to work for large landlords, the Skylines, CLVs of the world. And one thing they were very good at was vetting their tenants. You have to be very diligent of that at the beginning and vet your tenants. Find out some information about them, because if they've have behavior that they've destroyed your place and not paid the bills and stuff, asking the right questions may drill down a little further into what this tenancy might really be like. Check their references. Go through their references and check them out and make sure that what this person's telling you is the truth, because I've had some tenants just make up references. You phone them and it's like, I have no clue who this guy is. So vet your tenants very, very carefully and do your quarterly inspections. And a lot of times landlords will do this when the smoke alarm has to be changed, the battery for that, or the furnace filter. Do your inspections and make sure you do them, or if you're out of town, have a property manager do it so that you can keep on top of it, because very rarely does a unit go from immaculate to destroyed. It takes time to do that. So and even if the landlord is friendly with the neighbors, I'm not saying spy on your tenant or anything like that, but you need to make sure the unit is livable and fit for habitation. And if a person has destroyed the place, the landlord could, quite truthfully, the tenant could take the landlord to the place and say, I have all this maintenance stuff. And then there'd be an argument about who did the damages. So number one, vet your tenants very, very well. When you do give them the keys, do a move-in inspection and document everything. Do it on video if possible. And then do your inspections and be truthful about what you're inspecting for. Just say, hey, I'm doing the fire alarm, and while you're in there, just have a look around, kind of thing. To try to get give that 1-800 number again for the landlord self-help. It's 1-800-730-3218. And it's a good idea to get a hold of them before hearings. At the hearings, I do hear members say, well, the landlords can phone these people. You're already in a hearing. You're already stressed out. So get a hold of the self-help line if you can. Unfortunately, with the damage there, I hate to say this is going to sound terrible, but it's the cost of doing business. And that's why there is insurance. But you have to be very diligent about doing your inspections. It's unfortunate to see that. It really is. Yeah, and that's about all I can really think about the landlord's rights there. It's a shame. It is. It really is.
Well, I think it's a fair point, and I think we've focused, and we've been doing this. This is our third time together, Jeff. Yeah. And usually we talk heavily about tenants' rights and responsibilities, but the Residential Tenancy Act also covers landlords' rights and responsibilities as well. So the act at least tries to be equal in terms of whose rights are which and who has the responsibility towards each other. So we need good landlords in any community, especially ours. Who are willing to work with the tenants, who are willing to work with services and support people in our community. But it's also the responsibility of every tenant to be a good tenant and follow their responsibilities as outlined in the Residential Tenancies Act.
That's one of the many cool things about Chatham is that they have such a good team at the municipality that if you are a landlord and you are experiencing difficulties, chances are the municipality's already contacted me to contact the tenant. And if you're willing to save the tenancy, there are supports out there that can help with rent arrears, that can help with behavioral problems. I deal with a ton of supports. That's half the people I talk to, from CMHA to rapid rehousing to employment and social services. And they will all do whatever they can to try to save a tenancy and to try to mend a relationship between a tenant and a landlord, because sometimes those become a little poisoned. And if all of a sudden we can right the wrong and maybe get a little education to the landlord and some supports to the tenant, because this tenant who's trashed the place or what have you may not have any supports. And then all of a sudden we can look after the place, we can look after the tenant, we can look after the landlord. Everybody's happy. We've kept a tenancy and we prevented one more person from being homeless.
It's a fair point. I've heard many property managers or landlords reaching out to, for example, employment and social services. They provide a significant amount of support in the community. As you mentioned, CMHA, or Canadian Mental Health Association, provides a ton of supports. There are a lot of organizations that are willing to work with landlords and, of course, the tenants to support that relationship and support the tenancy so that the individual can stay housed and the landlord is able to ensure the rental unit and property is maintained properly.
One thing that I'd like to say about landlords that are experiencing stuff like this, try to get in touch with employment and social services, because they will try to help. I contact them on a daily basis and we solve a lot of problems working together with the parties. So definitely, I do see there's a follow-up question about what happens if the landlord can no longer get insurance on the building. It's kind of a tough one because I don't know the full situation. Normally, if a unit gets trashed once, your insurance company is not going to drop you. If so, I'd be looking for another insurance company, because they're used to this. Insurance companies, especially ones that rent to landlords, are used to this. And some places do get trashed. So if your insurance company is dropping you, that's brutal. I can't believe they're doing that. They should be supporting their customers. But then again, in the insurance world, I'll leave it at that. Yeah.
Hey, there's good insurance agents out there too.
Hey, there's good everybody out there. Yeah, that's right.
Great. Well, Jeff, for those who are on the live call with us right now or on the Facebook Live, please comment below, put your questions in the chat box, and we are going to answer them as best we can. It's about 12:48 right now, and we're looking to potentially wrap up the Facebook Live event soon. So if you have any questions, make sure to get them in. Jeff, if we were to recap kind of maybe not the entire conversation, but what are some of the major key points that we need to make sure this community is aware of when it comes to their rights and responsibilities as a tenant and a landlord?
If a landlord wants to do renovations to your unit, make sure they give you an N13. That gives you all your legal rights, and you have the right to first refusal, and you get to move into a newly renovated place for the same amount of money. If they want to do renovations and want you to sign a contract or an N11, tell them you'd like to sleep on it or you'd like to get some legal advice, because that is not the proper process to do it. And if they're not using the proper process, you got to ask yourself why. It's a very easy process. It's made very transparent for a reason. So what are they trying to hide? Those would be the two main things I would recap. And don't sign anything. Don't sign anything. Don't sign anything. We're just a phone call away, and none of this stuff has to be done right away. That's why in some laws there is a cooling off period. There's not for landlord and tenant board, but for some things there is. And for that reason there, nothing needs to be signed right away. So get a hold of us either through the website or through the phone, and we're there to help you. Is there anything else I'd like to mention about that?
If you want to mention anything about the cash for keys.
Cash for keys, again, is legal. Just make sure that you know what you're getting yourself into, because the place you leave, you're not going to find that amount of rent again. As soon as a apartment that is rented out for $750, as soon as that tenant moves, that unit is no longer around. You're never going to find that unit, and they're starting to call those unicorns. They're just, you hear about them, but nobody's ever seen them out there, and they're disappearing quicker than anything. So, and I would also like to reiterate landlord's own use, the N12. Again, get a hold of us, because they were misusing this process so much. They changed the law huge 2 Marches ago. So 2020, they changed the law so that all of a sudden the landlord could be liable to paying you 1 full year's worth of rent. That's how blatant this has gotten, and that's why they're changing the laws like this. So any kind of document you get, just remember, if it looks like an eviction notice, it isn't, unless it's from the landlord and tenant board and it's stamped. And if you got a question about it, just get a hold of us. That's what we're there for.
And Jeff, just one last question from a viewer coming in. What steps can a tenant take if there are necessary repairs required that the landlord is ignoring? What's the process they can take?
Okay, so what I always tell tenants to do is make the request via email if possible, if not via text. If you do make the request in writing, text back the landlord and say, as per our conversation today, you are going to do this repairs. With the repairs, as soon as you let him know, the clock starts ticking. And what the board looks at is what needed to be repaired, when did the tenant know, and did the landlord do the repairs in the reasonable amount of time? If your landlord's blowing you off and just not answering, what I always tell tenants to do after I've talked to them is I tell them that there is a T6 process that you can do. It's for maintenance applications. But I normally tell the tenant to email the landlord, and then in the email say, I was talking to Jeff at the Chatham-Kent Legal Clinic, and we'd like to know what the timeline for these repairs are. The majority of the time, as soon as the legal clinic's name is dropped, they realize that the tenant has gotten some legal advice, and this could move forward if they don't do anything. Now, some landlords just really, you know what, I don't have the money, or I don't have the time, or I don't want to. If you do have a landlord like that, you can file what I had said earlier, a T6, and you can find that on the Landlord and Tenant Board's website. And if you were to phone the clinic, we'd gladly walk you through the process of filing that. Most of these applications now have to be filed through a portal, but if somebody is on assistance, we have a special fax number. We can fax it off to them so they don't have to try to navigate the portal that that has this, and the portal's not very good. So again, if your landlord's not doing the maintenance or repairs, email them. Just let them know that you got a little bit of legal advice, and chances are they will come around. If not, get a hold of us. We'll help you with the T6.
So what I'm hearing, Jeff, as you say, you're quite a bigwig, and you say name drop Jeff Wilkins in the process.
No, name drop the clinic. One thing I've noticed with the clinic is that any city you're in, as soon as you mention a legal clinic, the hair stands up on the back of their neck, because they do not want to get involved with the legal clinic. We don't charge for our services. We're not like legal aid. We don't run on certificates. We're a total different entity than legal aid, and we in the majority of the time don't charge for our services. So as soon as they hear that, they know we can put a lot of energy behind what we're doing, where they're going to have to put a lot of money behind defending what we're doing. So no, not me, because who knows what happens in the future, but any legal clinic, you drop that name. And I know when I worked for landlords, I got my ears to perk up pretty quick.
I can only imagine.
Yeah.
Before we end out today, I wanted to just have one last fear question that's come in, just for clarification. We talked about the N13 and the N11, the N12. We've talked about cash for keys and contracts, but can you speak a little bit about those demo evictions or renovictions again, just to clarify what is really legal when it comes to renovictions? Is that legal?
Well, with the N13, the language on it is very specific. They can do renovations, but the renovations have to be severe enough that they must obtain building permits. So we're talking some pretty severe renovations, and they are allowed to do that, but you do have the right to first refusal, and you can move in for the same amount of rent. So it is legal to do that. A lot of times the renovations aren't going to be that extensive. If you're doing anything electrical or plumbing, yes, there's going to have to be permits, and that's pretty easy to find out if they've gotten the permits or not. But it is legal to do that, and you may have to move out for a few months. That could be legitimate, and that throws in the problem of, okay, where am I going to go for 3 months? What can I do for those 3 to 6 months kind of thing? So it is legal, but it is one of those it's one of those evictions that I hate, because it's no fault. Tenant didn't do anything. They just were being a tenant.
And just to clarify, when you say first right of refusal, you mean they have the right after the renovation to either come back into the renovated unit that they were living in at the same price they paid before the renovation, or they can say, you know what, I'm good. I found a new place. I will refuse. Okay.
And that happens quite a bit. With the N13, the only thing you really have to do is you have to make that decision. Yes, I'm going to move back in, and then give it to the landlord in writing. I'm going to move back in, and let the landlord know where you're moving to, so that when it's all ready, he can contact you. Because if he doesn't know where to get a hold of you, it's pretty difficult to do what's legal.
And last piece, just to clarify, if I remember correctly, you mentioned some pieces around, if the landlord has another rental unit available, or does the landlord have to provide any funding for you to find new rental units at all if you're going through an N13 process?
No, what they normally have to do, depending on how many units there are, they have to either at least give you 1 month's worth of rent or 3 months worth of rent. And that's about all they have to do. But I have had landlords that get what's going on and they feel bad about it. So they've given extra money, or they've said, hey, I know this place that we've got an Airbnb or something that you can stay at. So try to work with your landlord, because a lot of landlords are doing this to increase the value of their property. And sometimes they're just doing it because they bought the place and they look at it and go, hey, this needs to be fixed up. This person deserves a little better. So work with your landlord. Some of them are legit. Some of these N13 notices are legitimate. And a lot of times the landlord will want to work with you because they got in this business for a couple reasons. And I think a lot of them are proud to have tenants that want to stay in their places. So work with your landlords.
Absolutely. Well, Jeff, seeing no further questions coming in at this point, and just looking at the time, I think it is time to wrap up another very successful Facebook Live event that I think we've rebranded. Don't sign anything unless you talk to the Chatham-Kent Legal Clinic. Thank you very much, Jeff, for joining us and for sharing everything you are aware of and tenants' rights and responsibilities surrounding the N13, the N12, the N11, cash for keys and contracts and other legal advice pieces around what we can term as an umbrella term for like renovictions or being evicted for certain purposes. Thank you very much for your time, Jeff. The Chatham-Kent Legal Clinic's phone number is 519-351-6771, or you can visit their website. It's brand new, ton of information. You can contact them through their website too. And we also are going to be having a session next week, again with Jeff, on the same topic to make sure this point is driven home. Next Wednesday, the 16th at 7 p.m., we'll be back here with Jeff Wilkins from the Chatham-Kent Legal Clinic. Jeff, anything you'd like to say before we sign off?
Mark your calendars and don't sign anything.
Mark the calendar. Yeah, sign that calendar, but don't sign any contracts. Thanks so much, Jeff. And thank you to everyone who's been watching and participating. Hopefully this was helpful. Have a great afternoon.
Bye, everybody.